Cloves. Most of you have a jar of them collecting dust somewhere in the back of a cabinet, pulled out once a year for a holiday recipe and then forgotten. And look, that makes sense, because they're just a spice. Except a USDA human trial found that eating the equivalent of 1 to 2 cloves a day dropped blood sugar by 33% in 30 days. And the effect held even after people stopped taking them. That's not a supplement company claim. That's published research on actual people. And the numbers are hard to argue with. That's what we're getting into today. Now I want to be straight with you from the start. I'm not going to tell you cloves are a miracle cure, or that 2 cloves a day is going to fix everything. That's not what the science says, and that's not what I'm about. What I am going to show you is what the evidence actually looks like, the real studies, the real numbers, and let you decide what to do with it. So here's what we're going to cover. What's inside a clove that makes researchers pay attention, what happens in your body when you eat them consistently, and a few things that are going to surprise you. Including one that surprised me when I first came across it. Let's get into it. The main compound in cloves is called eugenol. It makes up somewhere between 70 and 90% of cloves essential oil. And the part most people don't know, eugenol works on a specific enzyme in your body called COX-2. You may not recognize that name, but you definitely know the drugs that target it. Ibuprofen, aspirin, the whole class of anti-inflammatories you reach for when something hurts. They work by blocking COX-2, and eugenol does the same thing, through the same pathway. That's not a folk remedy claim. That's basic pharmacology, and it's been confirmed in peer-reviewed research. Now, why does that matter for someone in their 40s, 50s, or 60s? Because chronic low-grade inflammation is at the root of almost everything we're trying to avoid at this stage of life. Heart disease, joint pain, blood sugar problems, even cognitive decline. These aren't separate issues. They share a common thread, and that thread is inflammation running in the background, quietly, for years. So the idea that a small daily amount of a kitchen spice could help put the brakes on that process, even modestly, is worth paying attention to. But eugenol is only part of the story. Cloves also happen to be one of the most antioxidant-dense foods ever measured. The USDA tested cloves on something called the ORAC scale, a standardized way of measuring how well a food neutralizes free radicals in the body. Cloves scored 290,000 units per 100 grams. To put that in perspective, blueberries, which everyone talks about as the gold standard for antioxidants, score around 9,600. Cloves scored 30 times higher. And free radicals matter because they're not just some abstract chemistry concept. They are the mechanism behind cellular aging. They damage DNA. They accelerate the breakdown of tissue. They're a major driver of the chronic disease process. When your antioxidant intake is low, that damage accumulates faster than your body can repair it. 2 cloves, that's it. A tiny amount of one of the most antioxidant-rich substances ever measured. That's the foundation. Now let's look at what the research actually shows when people eat them consistently. The study I mentioned at the top came out of the USDA's Beltsville Human Nutrition Research Center. And I want to walk you through the numbers because they're worth understanding. They took 36 people with type 2 diabetes, divided them into groups. One group got a placebo. The other groups got capsules containing 1, 2, or 3 grams of cloves per day, which works out to roughly 1 to 3 whole cloves. They ran this for 30 days, then had everyone stop for 10 days to see what happened. So what does that actually mean in real numbers? Average blood glucose at the start of the study, 225 live mg/dL. That's high, clinically high. By the end of 30 days, that number had dropped to 150, a 33% reduction from a spice in 1 month. And what really stood out, after the 10-day washout period, after they stopped taking cloves entirely, the numbers were still significantly lower than where they started. The effect didn't just vanish when they stopped. It lingered. LDL cholesterol dropped too, from 175 down to 145. Triglycerides fell, and HDL, the good cholesterol, stayed exactly where it was, which matters because a lot of interventions that lower LDL also drag down HDL. This one didn't. Now, I want to be honest with you here. This was a relatively small study, 36 people, and it focused specifically on people who already had type 2 diabetes. So if you don't have diabetes, can you still benefit? That's where a 2019 study published in BMC Complementary Medicine comes in. They looked at healthy volunteers and people with prediabetes. Same idea, daily clove extract for 30 days. And they found that both fasting glucose and post-meal blood sugar spikes came down in both groups, not just the diabetic group, healthy people too. I see this pattern come up a lot. Someone's not diabetic, doesn't think blood sugar is their issue, but they're tired after meals, they get that mid-afternoon crash, they carry a little extra weight around the middle that won't budge no matter what they do. And a lot of the time, when you dig into it, unstable blood sugar is sitting underneath all of that, quietly running the show. The Clove research, while it's still early and more large-scale trials are needed, is pointing at a real mechanism. Eugenol appears to mimic some of insulin's effects at the cellular level, helping glucose get taken up by your cells more efficiently instead of sitting in your bloodstream. That's not magic, that's biochemistry, and it's the same compound we talked about earlier, the one blocking COX-2, the one driving that antioxidant score off the charts. One small thing, doing a lot of different things. So we've covered the blood sugar piece. But remember what we said about eugenol blocking COX-2, the same pathway as ibuprofen? That's where the inflammation story gets interesting. Because most people think about inflammation as a specific thing, a sore knee, a swollen finger, something you can see and feel. And yeah, that's one kind. But the inflammation that does the most long-term damage is the kind you can't feel at all. It's systemic, low-grade, constant, and it runs for years before it shows up as anything you'd recognize as a symptom. Eugenol's ability to suppress inflammatory signaling isn't dramatic or immediate. You're not going to chew 2 cloves and feel your joints loosen up. What the research is pointing to is a cumulative dampening effect, less inflammatory activity in the background over time. And for a body that's been running hot for years, that kind of consistent pressure in the right direction adds up. Now pay attention to this one, and this one surprises people. Oral health. Clove oil has been used in dentistry for over a century. That's not alternative medicine. Eugenol is an FDA-approved ingredient in dental products, including temporary fillings and root canal sealers. Research out of King Saud University confirmed that clove extract effectively inhibits Streptococcus mutans, the primary bacteria responsible for tooth decay. And a separate study found that a clove-based gel numbed gum tissue as effectively as benzocaine, the topical anesthetic your dentist uses before a needle. Now, eating 2 whole cloves isn't the same as applying concentrated clove oil to your gums. Actually, let me be more precise. The antibacterial effect in your mouth from chewing a clove comes from eugenol being released as you bite down. It's real and measurable, but it's a lighter dose than a clinical preparation. What it does do is create an antibacterial environment in the mouth that your regular brushing doesn't fully cover. And oral health is not a small thing. The research connecting gum disease to cardiovascular risk, to blood sugar dysregulation, to systemic inflammation, it's substantial. The mouth is not separate from the rest of you. So what does that mean when you add it all together? One spice pressing down on blood sugar, reducing bacterial load in the mouth, consistently suppressing the inflammatory signaling that connects to nearly every chronic condition that gets harder to manage after 50. And this is the part I want you to sit with for a moment, because I talk to people all the time who are managing 3 or 4 different issues: blood sugar, joint pain, fatigue, cholesterol, like they're separate problems requiring separate solutions. A pill for this, a supplement for that, and they're exhausted by it. What the research on cloves is hinting at, and I'm not overstating it, this is genuinely what the data suggests, is that many of these conditions share the same underlying drivers: oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, unstable glucose metabolism. Address those, and you're not managing 4 separate problems. You're addressing one root. 2 cloves a day is not going to reverse a decade of damage. I need to be honest about that. But this is what worries me when people brush it off. 10 years from now, this is how it plays out. Someone who used to hike on weekends, who used to get down on the floor on a Saturday morning to play with their grandkids, who used to carry their own groceries without giving it a second thought. And now they can't do any of those things. Not because of one dramatic event, because of 1,000 small mornings where the inflammation kept running, the blood sugar kept spiking, and nothing was pushing back. I've seen it. And they almost always say the same thing. I wish I'd paid attention to this sooner. It doesn't have to go that way. You're watching this video. You know what the research shows now. That puts you ahead of most people. And it means you still have time to make the consistent choices that show up in your life 10 years from now. That's the whole reason this conversation matters. 2 whole cloves a day is the amount that lines up with what the studies used, roughly 1 to 2 grams. That's a small, culinary-level dose, not a supplement, not an extract, not a concentrated oil, just the spice. The simplest way? Drop 2 whole cloves into hot water and let them steep for about 10 minutes. What you get is a mild, slightly spicy tea that honestly isn't bad. Some people chew them directly. The eugenol releases as you bite down, which is also where that oral health benefit kicks in. Others grind them and add a small pinch to their morning oatmeal, a smoothie, or whatever they're already eating. It doesn't take much. Cloves are strong, and a little goes a long way. A few things I want to be upfront about before you start. If you're on blood thinners, warfarin, aspirin therapy, anything in that category, talk to your doctor first. Eugenol has mild blood-thinning properties, and combining it with anticoagulant medication is something you want a professional to weigh in on. Same goes if you're diabetic and on medication to lower your blood sugar. The research showed cloves can bring glucose down meaningfully, which is great in isolation, but if you're already on metformin or insulin, adding something that amplifies that effect without supervision isn't smart. And if you have surgery coming up in the next 2 weeks, hold off entirely. For most healthy adults, 2 whole cloves a day is safe. The FDA considers cloves generally recognized as safe at culinary amounts. This is a spice, not a pharmaceutical. All right, the title of this video says 14 days, and I want to address that honestly because most of the human research ran for 30 days. So what happens in 14? The changes in the first 2 weeks are mostly happening at a level you can't feel yet. Inflammatory markers shifting, blood glucose metabolism adjusting. You're not going to wake up on day 14 feeling transformed, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. What you might notice is subtler. Some people report their digestion feeling a bit smoother. Cloves stimulate digestive enzyme production and have been used for that in traditional medicine for centuries. Some notice their gums feel healthier. Some find they have less of that mid-afternoon slump we talked about earlier, which tracks with what the blood sugar research is pointing to. The real payoff is the one that doesn't announce itself. It's the inflammation that didn't spike, the blood sugar that didn't surge and crash, the oxidative damage that got neutralized before it added to the pile. That's invisible in the short term. It shows up in the long term, in the things you're still able to do, in the way your body is holding up, in the numbers at your next checkup. 2 cloves, something you already have in your kitchen or can pick up at any grocery store for a couple of dollars. Eaten consistently, over time. The research says it's worth doing, and the barrier is about as low as it gets. So start tomorrow, steep 2 cloves in hot water, drink it in the morning, and stay consistent. That's it. If this gave you something useful, hit subscribe. I cover this kind of research regularly, and there's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.